Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode we are going to be taking a look at the brand spanking new FAQ that GW has just dropped for Codex Astra what? For Codex Imperial Guard, son. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this FAQ is pretty impactful. Many Imperial Guard players are going to have to alter their lists now that this thing is out. And so, without further ado, let's dive straight into today's video. Starting off strong, GW have decided to drop a few hot steamy turds into the camp of the Imperial Infantry because Caden Shock Troopers and Death Corps of Krieg can now no longer take two of the same special weapon in their squads. That's right, all of your double plasma Cadian squads are now verboten. They were a bright, beautiful star in this dark, cold world, and they've been taken from us too soon. Likewise, you can't take double melter gun in your Cadian shock troops, or double grenade launch, or double flamer if you're some sort of madman that was taking those options. Now you must take one of each special weapon. So in your Cadian shock troop squad, you could take one plasma and one melter gun, or one plasma one grenade launcher, or one melter, one grenade launcher, one melter, one flamer, so on and so forth. Point is, you can no longer double up on dem special weapons. However, the actual impact of this is pretty minimal. Most Imperial Guard players are still going to take Caden Shock Troops as their go-to troop choice. They're just going to take them with plasma and melter now, because both those weapons are still fantastic. And plasma and melter guns actually complement each other relatively well. A plasma gun is most effective in a 12-inch range. A melter gun is also most effective and only effective within a 12-inch range as well. So their range complements each other. They're both strength 8, so the strength complements each other. They've both got a high AP. One is AP -3, one is AP -4 with take aim. The plasma gun is AP -4, and the melter gun is AP -5, but you're rarely going to need that AP -5 at some point between AP2 and AP4. You're going to bump into someone's invulnerable save anyway. So they've both got very high AP, and they both have the same sort of similar damage output. A double tapping plasma gun will do 4 damage. A melter gun will do an average of 3.5 to 4 damage if it gets that successful wound through. So they actually complement each other very well. It's more just an inconvenience because now you've got to roll 2 separate weapon profiles rather than being able to go, oh, 4 plasma gun shots or 2 plasma gun shots, does he overheat and die? No. Right, 2 plasma gun shots, does he overheat and die? No. Now you've got to do 2 plasma gun shots, resolve those all the way through, and then go, all right, now I've got to do my melter gun all the way through. It's just a bit more fiddly. It's a bit less convenient, but the actual impact is barely noticeable. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of the Gas Mask Boys. I think the Death Corps Krieg have definitely got the pooier end of the stick for this FAQ. Unlike Cadians, Death Corps only really had access to the one good special weapon, which was the melter gun. Sure, you can take a plasma gun in the squad, but you had to give up your Voxcaster to be able to do that. And thanks to Imperial Guard secondaries like Inflexible Command, really don't want to give up that Voxcaster. I know it's kind of a crazy world that we're living in right now where Voxcasters are more valuable to Guard players than plasma guns. I honestly never thought I'd see the day, but that is the reality of the situation. And so the impact on Death Corps of Krieg is that you're going to be running around with squads who are going to have Voxcasters, a single melter gun, and then a second special weapon that they're really not very enthusiastic about or bothered about taking. Because once you've taken that Voxcaster that you need for your secondaries, and you've taken the melter gun, which you're always going to be putting in that squad, you've got to pick between a sniper rifle, a grenade launcher, and a flamer. And none of those weapons really complement the melter gun. Okay, you see, some people might say, well, what about the flamer? The flamer is the one that I see a lot of people pivoting into for their Death Corps squads now. And I think the reason why a lot of people pivot into flamers is because it feels natural that those two weapons should go together. It's probably because Sister Battle, they run lots of melter guns and flamers, and that's kind of a natural theme. They all shoot fire or have heat-based weaponry. That kind of feels like they should go together. They're both short-ranged. But outside of a thematic sense of them going together, and outside of the fact they're both 12-inch range weapons, they're actually not complementary in any way, shape, or form. The flamer has half the strength of the melter gun. It has no AP unless you give it take aim. Then it's only AP -1, which isn't anywhere near the same as AP -3, 4, or 5. And the damage is completely different. the damage is 1 on the Flamer, whereas the damage is D6, potentially D6 plus 2 on that melter gun. 1 is a single shot purely designed for blowing away tanks and heavy infantry weapon, and the other is a random shot, short-ranged anti-infantry weapon, anti-light infantry weapon at that. I know some people may argue that, well, if you give it a melter gun and a flamer, at least they've got similar ranges, and hey, it can take on a variety of targets. It's like, no, when it comes to picking special weapons, it's better to whole-ass one thing than half-ass 2 things. So for me personally, I probably wouldn't recommend going towards melter, flamer, Krieg squads. I know that seems against the grain, but hear me out. I actually think your better secondary weapon is going to be the grenade launcher. I'm going to give you all a moment to get up off the floor because I imagine you've all fallen out of your chair. Mordian Glory just recommended grenade launchers. He has been crapping on them for years. Why is he now recommending them? Well, the thing is that grenade launchers are at least somewhat complementary to your melter guns. They're strength 6. It's at least sort of the same ballpark of strength 8. It's still got a bit of punch behind it. With take aim, it's AP -2. That's at least going to have an impact on someone's armor save and might also start bumping up against an invulnerable save. And if you shoot a grenade launcher at Custodes, you only really need AP -2 because you're going to be bumping into that 4+ invuln pretty early on, right? And whilst the grenade launcher damage output isn't particularly mind-blowing, it can peak up to damage 3, which is pretty punchy. It's pretty nice. At the end of the day, you've got 2 weapons in that squad which are going to benefit from take aim the most because they're going to benefit from the +1 hit modifier, and the improvement to the AP actually means something. And they also are relatively punchy shots. They feel like they've got a bit of heft behind them, and they just feel a little bit more like natural bedfellows. They feel a little bit more complementary. So I would say if you're going Deathcore of Krieg, you want to be thinking about grenade launcher melter squads as a primary option for your 2 special weapons, and then thinking about melter and flamers as a secondary sort of backup if you run out of grenade launchers. For those of you curious why I've not mentioned the sniper rifle, honestly, I would just totally avoid it. Sniper rifles are not very good in 40k as a whole. There are some exceptions to it. You've got some pretty wacky Gene Stealer cult ones. The Kazakin's hotshot sniper is pretty nice, but your basic bog standard sniper rifle really isn't very impressive. So I would just not even consider it. It doesn't complement the melter gun in any way, shape or form. The melter gun is a short-range assault weapon designed for punching tanks. Sniper rifle is a long-ranged heavy weapon designed for doing sweet fuck all. So that is why I probably wouldn't go for the sniper rifle. For me, like I said, grenade launcher melter should be your first option. Melter, flamer should be your second option. But before we move on, I actually want to dig a little bit deeper into this section of the FAQ, because I think the big question is now, which one of these troop choices is better? Which is going to be the go-to for the Guard community? The Deathcore of Krieg or the Cadian Shock Troops? You see, for a little while back there, it looked like the Deathcore Krieg was starting to become the more popular choice for the Cadian Shock Troops. I know a lot of people were instinctively going towards the Cadians because they saw that cheaper price tag, but I had been doing a lot of work with the Deathcore of Krieg, and I'd been talking to a lot of people about it, and I knew a lot of other players that had started to try them out and were going, hang on, these guys are actually really good. They've got fantastic durability, and their firepower was very similar to the Cadians. Yeah, double plasma felt like the more natural option, but being able to stick 2 melter guns in a Deathcore of Krieg squad really meant that their firepower was nothing to sniff at. If you ran your standard 100 infantry in your Guard army, and you could take 20 melter guns in those 100 infantry, not only did you have a wall of meat that was extremely durable with all that mini transhuman and stuff, but it also was a threat. No one wants melter guns running around blasting them. And the thing is that if a Deathcore of Krieg squad got whittled down to where there was only like 3 or 4 people left in the squad, that still was a big problem for your opponent, because no one wants 2 melter guns running around causing them problems. And the sad reality of the situation is, guys, is that I think the ability for the Deathcore of Krieg to compete with the Cadian Shock Troops has just become a lot less. I think most people are going to go towards Cadian Shock Troops now. I'm looking at going towards Cadian Shock Troops, because the problem with taking the double melter gun off the Krieg is that you now have to spend more points elsewhere in your list making up for that firepower. So Deathcore of Krieg before, you had essentially the same firepower as the Cadians, and you were just willing to spend more points so that you had more durability. But now that if you're taking 100 infantry in your army, now that you're lacking 10 melter guns in your force, you've now got to spend points elsewhere in your list on other fire support options to make up the difference. And so you're spending more points for the troop choice and more points on the other end as well. Overall, it's just a way less efficient choice. And I think that why wouldn't you now go towards cadence shock troops, which you can get more of them? For every 10 squads of Krieg, you can get 20 cadence shock troops, basically. And also, those cadence shock troops, they don't need babysitting. They've got all the firepower they need within their squad. And so that gives you more points elsewhere to spend on fire support or more infantry or more other officers and stuff like that. It just makes a lot more sense to go towards cadence shock troops now. And so I think outside of those fluffy armies where people are trying to take something a bit skew, like a pure infantry army, or something that's a little bit narrative, like a pure Death Corps Krieg, like siege army, I think you're going to see cadence shock troops be the go-to troop choice for the majority of players out there. The other thing to consider is the impact this might have on the other two troop choices we have in our codex, the Catachans and your basic infantry squad. That's right, all of you Catachan players, stand up and rejoice. Your time is now, because you finally have a unique selling point around the Jungle Fighters datasheet. You are the only troop choice in our codex which can take two of the same special weapon. Does that mean we should all pivot into Catachans? No, because unfortunately the only special weapon that Catachan Jungle Fighters can take is Flamers. And whilst double flamer Catachans is alright, I'm not willing to spend 5 points more on that very, very niche ability. Because the reason why Catachans can take two flames, guys, in case you're wondering, is because their datasheet didn't have the whole asterisk that said you cannot take the same weapon more than once, or the same weapon more than twice as it was originally printed. Their datasheet simply said for every 5 models in the unit, you can take 1 flamer. And as Catachans come in a squad of 10, that meant you can take 2 flamethrowers. The funny thing is that I can certainly see Games Workshop coming along in 6 months' time and go, oh, yeah, by the way, bit of a weird word around that whole for every 5 models in the unit. That doesn't really make sense. Let's change that to every 10 models in the unit. And all the Catachan players being like, no! Because the wording around the whole you can't select the same weapon more than twice was weird. Surely the wording around for every 5 models in a squad that comes with 10 models as standard can take a flamer is also pretty weird. So Catachan players, enjoy it while you can. Enjoy your very tiny star of fame. I wouldn't be surprised if GW FAQ'd it. And even if they don't, unfortunately, it's still not making me pivot towards Catachans. If Catachans was 65 points, they were just 5 points cheaper, maybe I consider it, because it's like, hey, double flamer, I'm sure I can make something work around that. But realistically, I think Catachans, you need to be 60 points per squad and be able to take a changed sword on your sergeant, because you can't currently, which is just hilarious. Or I think to fix Catachans, you need to give them a pretty serious overhaul, keep them at 70 points. And I think the way you just fix them overnight is you give them the ability to forward deploy, like Ratlings, like Sentinels. If you could have a troop choice that could forward deploy, like Catachans, it would actually give them a lot of tactical playability. But they don't have that. GW decided not to give them that. Maybe that's something they'll get later on in the future. Who knows? But right now, Catachan boys, at least you can rejoice in the fact that you have something about your unit which is moderately interesting, although I don't think anyone's going to really take you seriously still. I'm sorry. But whilst the Catachans are all off in the corner patting themselves on the back and saying that double flame and jungle fighter squads is going to become the new meta, let's take a look at the other troop choice that we've got available to us, which is the infantry squad, because I think this might have just had a bit of a boost to its relevancy. You see, prior to this FAQ, the argument between taking infantry squad over a cadence shock troop squad was pretty much non-existent, because double plasma cadence just made sense. At close range, you were getting 4 shots, damage 2, great AP, fantastic. All of that just works. But now you're looking at the cadence shock troop squad and you're like, okay, well, actually, I'm only getting 3 shots at close range. And I have to be at close range for one of my guns to work. When I could take double plasma, even if I wasn't within 12 inches, I could still put out 2 shots. That's still good. That still had a lot of power behind it. And the damage 2 was great. But now Cadian shock troops like, okay, at long range, I've had my number of shots just half. That's it. I'm just down to one shot at 24-inch range with my plasma gun. That's not ideal. And then going over to close range, I've had my shots cut by 25. Then I've gone from 4 shots to 3 shots. That damage output decrease is noticeable, especially at that long range bracket, and it's not insignificant at the short range bracket. Enter the infantry squad with heavy bolter and plasma gun. Because the infantry squad with heavy bolter at long range is going to be putting out 4 damage 2 shots. Got the plasma gun shots, and you got the 3 from the heavy bolter. That is literally 4 times the number of damage 2 shots that the Cadian Shock Trooper squad can do at any range over 13 inches. That's pretty big. Previously, it wasn't such a big difference. Previously, it was like 2 shots of plasma versus 4 shots from the heavy bolter and the 1 plasma gun. But the heavy bolter shots weren't as good. Obviously, they're only AP-1. The strength is a bit less. But 4 times the number of shots? Just looking at it from the damage of those shots alone, it's like, okay, hang on. I got to think about this. It's a pretty important factor to take into account. And then when you get up to close range, it's like, well, the infantry squad is now putting out 5 damage 2 shots at close range. And the Cadian squad is still only putting out 3. And before this FAQ, that Cadian shock squad would have been putting out 4 plasma shots to the 5 of the infantry squad. And those 4 plasma shots are obviously way better than, 3 heavy bolter shots and a couple of plasma shots. But now that argument's not there, the volume of fire really is in the corner of the infantry squad. And I think that heavy bolter plasma could be at the very least equal to plasma melter Cadian squads now. I think that a lot of guard players who have been sitting on the heavy weapons that have been grumbling about, oh, these new Cadian shock troops, these new fangled things, I didn't need double plasma back in my day. Back in my day, the heavy weapon and the bloody plasma, that was enough to get us through. I think you guys have now been more vindicated than anyone else, because I honestly believe that bringing infantry squads back into your list is a sound tactical move for a lot of guard players to do. I would put infantry squads and shock troop squads on the same level now, which is a bold statement to make. But I think when you actually break it down and look at some of the numbers, my gut instinct is telling me that the volume of fire that an infantry squad can put out is now a significant factor in its favour over the quality of shots that the Cadian shock troopers can put out. I know that's a bold statement to make. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that. I know people are going to say, Morning Glory, you've not taken into account the exploding lasguns of the Cadians. You've not taken into account the Cadia stands ability that you can put on the shock troops. You've not taken into account the relic of Lost Cadia. Yeah, those are all great points. But I would argue only one of those is really relevant, which is the lasgun one, because most people aren't putting Cadia stands on an infantry squad. Most people are saving that for their Kazakin units, or if they're using it in a dreadnought-like situation. And I also don't think many people are taking the relic of Lost Cadia. I think most people will include 1 to 2 relics in their army, and the 2 relics that most guard players are taking is the Big Bullshit Banner and Gatekeeper. I haven't seen anyone take a list that realistically is taking the relic of Lost Cadia. The exploding 6s on the lasguns really is a big point in the favour of the Cadian shock troops, though. And I think where we see them pull ahead and keep their niche is in the close range firefights. I think if you are an infantry squad that can move at the board and be reasonably effective at every range bracket, long range, medium range, and short range, and I define long range as anything that's like 25 to 36 inches, medium range being anything that is, 13 to 24 inches, and short range being 12 inches and under. I think that the infantry squad's got you covered, because at long range, you've got that heavy bolter coming in. At medium range, the plasma gun starts doing some work. And at short range, you've still got your rapid fire lasguns, and your plasma gun gets a bit more shots. However, if you want an infantry squad that is really good at short range blitz firefights, I think the Cadian shock troops definitely have the edge. At medium range, they don't have any long range capability because they can't shoot outside of 24 inches. They've got some medium range capability, but like we said, it's basically like 1 plasma shot and a handful of lasgun shots. But at close range, you're starting to get your melter in there, you're starting to get your double tapping plasma, and you're getting loads and loads of lasgun shots, which means you have more opportunities to trigger that exploding lasgun ability. So I think where the Cadian shock troops really have that niche is in that close range firefights. And I think that is where you'll find a lot of your infantry fights are taking place, because you're pushing them forward into the middle of the board and you're fighting over those middle objectives. All I'm saying, guys, is that I think regular infantry squads with heavy bolts and plasma guns and cane infantry squads are pretty equal now, and there's nothing wrong with you taking a mix of them in your army. But that's all I've got to say about this part of the FAQ. I know some of you guys say, all you've got to say about it, Morning Glory, you've just spent about 30 minutes talking about 2 bloody bullet points. There's loads more to talk about in the FAQ. It's like, yeah, I know, but come on, guys. I'm a pure infantry commander at heart. When I see something that affects the infantry, I'm going to riff about it. So please forgive me. But anyway, moving on, let's take a look at some of the other points in this FAQ. So next up, we've got a quick clarification around the Militarum plasma cannon. Basically, when you supercharge this weapon, if you roll a 1 to hit and it gets hot, it's going to do a mortal wound to the bearer's unit rather than just the bearer. Some of you might not understand the implications of this. Basically, before this FAQ, what would happen is if you had a unit of sentinels and they all had plasma cannons and you overcharged them all and you shot them all, you could have a weird situation where you'd have multiple members in a squad with different wounds left over. So you might have one sentinel that didn't overcharge, one sentinel that overcharged and did 2 mortal wounds to itself, and one sentinel that overcharged and did 1 mortal wound to itself. And in 40k 9th edition, you should never have a squad which has multiple wounds in it, which has different models on different wound values. It should always be one model is ground down and then killed, and then you move on to the next and move on to the next. The reason that 9th edition is built around this is it's to fix the problem in previous editions of 40k, where you could take like a unit of 10 Terminators and you could go, right, I'm going to take a couple of wounds on each Terminator, but not actually lose any of them until I've taken something like 50 wounds or something ridiculous. So now what happens, guys, is you can fire all of your plasma cannon sentinels at the same time. You don't need to roll one at a time to see which one overcharges and which doesn't. You can go, nope, I've got 3 plasma cannons. I'll roll 3d3 shots. I'll get my average of 6 shots. I'll roll them all. And if I get 2 or 3 mortal wounds, it doesn't matter because they're all just going to go on one sentinel now. It's a great way of keeping the way the wounding mechanic works in 40k consistent, which is actually a surprise because GW is normally very inconsistent with this kind of stuff, but it's also a great way of making firing sentinels much quicker. I don't need to worry about which ones are going to overheat and which ones don't. I can now fire the whole squad, and that makes the whole unit much quicker, much more enjoyable, and much more time efficient to use on the tabletop. So good job, GW. This is a fantastic part of the FAQ, and it really does just clarify a little problem that was in the original codex. In a similar vein, we've now got an update to the Valkyrie, which fixes a problem with that datasheet. It now has the airborne special rule. Previously, it actually wasn't on the datasheet, which meant that you could charge it with anything that you wanted, whether it's a ground pounding space marine or a dude with a jump pack. It didn't matter. That's now been fixed. It's flying, it's up in the sky, it's miles away. If you don't have the fly keyword, you cannot charge the Valkyrie. Pretty simple fix, and it brings it in line with most other planes in 40k. And we've got one more quick fix in here as well, which is your Tempesta Scions. The sergeant in your Tempesta Scion squad now, they've clarified the bullet points so it actually makes sense. So previously, the Tempesta came equipped with a hotshot pistol, but when it came to what other war gear he could take, the codex said you can swap his bolt pistol out for a hotshot or a plasma pistol. And it's like, well, hang on, he doesn't physically come with a bolt pistol to start with. He comes with a hotshot pistol. So it didn't really make sense, but it was just a typo, guys. Basically now, GW have fixed it, so he starts with a hotshot pistol, and now he can swap that starting hotshot pistol out for a bolt pistol or a plasma pistol. I don't think anyone had even noticed that typo, but it was there, and now it's been fixed. So there we go. So that covers some of the quick points in the updates and errata section of this FAQ, but there's one more that I want to talk about that requires a little bit more analysis and is a bit more impactful. The changes to the Aegis defense line. It has now been given the obstacle terrain feature, keyword, and traits. What this means is units can now move over it. Your infantry, your tanks, your vehicles, they can all drive over or walk over the Aegis defense line without any problems. Before this FAQ, you couldn't go through this thing. It wasn't a ruin. It didn't have breachable or anything like that. It was just this impenetrable wall. I mean, of course, the Aegis defense line is the backbone of the guard. Nothing will get past our defenses, but nothing could get through them either way. Now it's been FAQ'd so that you can move your infantry over it. Your vehicles can drive over it. You just have to take into account going up and over the obstacle. But apart from that, it makes it a lot easier to have an Aegis defense line in your army and actually be able to maneuver around it without essentially running the risk of boxing yourself into your deployment zone and not being able to get out of it. At a basic level, this is a fantastic FAQ. I think most people were probably running it like that anyway, but it now means in tournament situations, you can take a defense line, and if you find yourself on a map that doesn't quite have enough terrain, you can be like, don't worry, I can bring my own, I can set it up and it's not going to hamper or inconvenience my army. Or you can find yourself on a table which has plenty of terrain in your deployment zone, but it's like table quarters, and most of that terrain seems to be at like the back of your deployment zone. You want a bit of cover at the front so you can deploy aggressively and take the fight to the enemy. The edge defense line now works brilliantly in all of those scenarios, and it means that it's actually got a bit of play in general guard lists at tournaments. But on a deeper level, this has some really big implications because it allows you to use the Aegis defense line to make Baneblades great again. And some of you are saying, how does this wall help my Baneblades? You see, one of the big problems with Baneblades is that they're big. They are chunky. And in a lot of tournaments, especially if you're running into like WTC style competitive terrain, Baneblades are so big that you can deploy them somewhere, but often it's at the back of your deployment zone and there's no way for them to physically move around the board because they can't breach the walls. You'd think a big tank would just smash down a little L-shaped ruin, but sadly it can't do it. And so the problem you have is that you can take a Baneblade, but it just sits there looking sad at the back of the deployment zone, not really being able to interact with the game. If you take an Aegis defense line, that's no longer such a big problem. Because if you take an Aegis defense line or another fortification, you can use it to replace a piece of terrain in your deployment zone. Now, to be clear, you can only replace a piece of terrain in your deployment zone if there's nowhere else for you to deploy the Aegis defense line. If you end up placing it down first, you won't be able to use it to remove a piece of terrain. However, if you set up the rest of your army and then go, oh, look, there's nowhere for me to put this Aegis defense line. I guess I'll remove this annoying little L-shaped ruin that's blocking my Baneblade off from moving down that little right flank. You can remove the L-shaped ruin. You can put the Aegis defense line in there, and suddenly you can open up a movement corridor. Because what I tend to find in a lot of these WTC style boards is once you get past that bit of terrain that's in your deployment zone that's blocking in your big tanks, actually the world kind of opens up a little bit and you have a lot of access to that mid board and there's a lot more play going on there. And you might start coming into problems when you bump into your opponent's deployment zone and their ruins in their side, but it really does open up the ability for your Baneblade to stonk its way into the middle of the board, start blasting everything up, having a great time. And so that, I think, is a really big brain way of using an ADL. I think it allows you to start getting Baneblades on the field and be able to deploy them consistently and reliably in your games, in your tournament games, but also you're not completely destroying yourself. Because if a lot of players will be like, why the hell would you want to remove an L-shaped piece of terrain? You need that to survive enemy alpha strikes. Yeah, sure, of course you do. But if you have got a smaller L-shape that maybe isn't fully obscuring, and all that's really doing is hiding a few infantry squads behind it, well, you might as well have an ADL do the same thing. Sure, they'll be able to be seen, those infantry, but they're going to have the extra cover and they're going to have the equivalent of Armor of Contempt, because that's what the Aegis defense line does. It gives you the ability to, to reduce AP by 1. So I think it actually makes a lot of sense. If you're thinking of taking a Baneblade to a tournament, you want to be able to move it around the board. You don't want to compromise your defensive posture. Take an Aegis defense line. It makes sense to me, and I think that is the big wrinkly brain way of using this FAQ. So that covers the update and errata, but now let's take a look at some of those frequently asked questions that GW has clarified. So we'll start with a couple of the small ones that we'll just run through quickly. First off, question, if I use the field promotion stratagem to select the Old Grudges warlord trait, am I able to select an enemy unit for the purposes of the Old Grudges ability? Answer, no, you can only select an enemy unit for the Old Grudges ability at the start of the first battle round. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I think most people are running it that way anyway. I'm pretty certain Old Grudges says you can only do it at the beginning of the game. So I think some people were maybe just trying to be a bit gamey with that. But as far as I was concerned, that was in black and white already. We've then got another question about field promotion stratagem. Can I use it to select the warlord trait of the warlord that just died, but on another model? No. I mean, again, that's pretty clear in the stratagem field promotion. It says you can select the warlord trait that no one has already had. So there you go. I like the idea that GW has just been bombarded by questions about the field promotion stratagem, and they've basically just come in and gone, look guys, stop being dickheads, stop trying to do shenanigans with field promotion stratagem. We included it in there because it was fun and it was a holdover from the Octarius Rising book. Look, just stop it, all right? So that's what GW is basically saying. Look, stop trying to pull any tricks with it. It's just a fun little stratagem and use it in that way. We then have a slightly more interesting FAQ, which is GW have said that you can use trophy hunters as your extra regimental doctrine on the Kazakin squads or using the veteran commandeer tank ace. The reason this is interesting is if you take trophy hunters as your regular regimental doctrine, that your army-wide ability, it takes up both slots. It means you can't take trophy hunters and also take industrial efficiency. It's like, no, you can take two other ones, or you can take Born Soldiers, or you can take Trophy Hunters. That's it. This FAQ has got a bunch of people excited, and I think the reason people are getting hyped up about this is because it feels like a great deal. Ooh, Trophy Hunters should take up 2 Regimental Doctrine slots, but now I can take it for just 1 using my Warrior Elite ability. Mwahaha! Thing is, Trophy Hunter's still dogshit, guys. It's not got any better. The trait itself hasn't improved in any way, shape, or form. You weren't taking it before. Why are you considering it now? It's still not very good. You can polish that turd as much as you want. It's still a turd. Looking at it from the tank ace perspective, I don't think it's better than taking elite sharpshooters on a vanquish cannon. That's just such a potent combination. And then from the Kazakin side, well, most players are running 1 or 2 units of Kazakin, and most people are taking a unit of Kazakin with mechanized infantry that they can put in a Chimera with Emperor's Fury, jump out and just absolutely bean someone with loads of plasma shots. And everyone else is taking the Kazakin bomb. And are you telling me you're honestly going to take trophy hunters over brutal strength or veteran guerrillas for your Kazakin bomb? No, you're not going to. So the reality of it is that you can now take trophy hunters using these abilities. You're just never going to. Now, those first 3 questions were kind of soft, talking about niche things like trophy hunters and field promotion stratagems. But now we're going to take a look at a pretty hefty nerf. This is probably the thing that's got the internet talking the most, because Ursula Creed just took the nerf bat to the face. In fact, I would say now she's probably not worth taking over Acadian Castellan. You see, they have updated the way her Lord Castellan's Fury ability works, and it is not for the better. So previously, how it used to work is if you gave the order to a unit using Creed, they got +1 strength to their ranged weapons. Even if that order was replaced later on, it doesn't matter. The act of doing the order has taken place. And so this meant that if you wanted to get 3 units of Kazakin with +1 strength and all of them would take aim, what you would do is you'd order a rubbish order to the first squad of Kazakin, a rubbish order to the second squad of Kazakin, and then you go, you know what, I'm going to order take aim to that last unit of Kazakin. I'm going to splash that order out to the first 2 squads, and oh look, I've got take aim on all the squads that I want, and I've got +1 strength on all the squads that I want. Great. But now how it works is that if you give an order to a squad, it will get +1 strength whilst it is under the effect of that order. However, if that order is then replaced, you lose Lord Castellan's Fury and you lose +1 strength. So that means now if you want to get +1 strength on 3 squads, you have to do 3 different orders. So you can't be like, I'm going to put take aim on 1 squad and then take aim on another squad and take aim on a 3rd squad. Because guess what, guys? Guard officers can't issue the same order more than once each. If you've got 2 different officers, they can of course do take aim each, but a guard officer can do take aim, and then they can think of a 2nd order they want to do and a 3rd order in Creed's case, and that's it. But they can't do take aim, take aim, take aim. And so as a result, if you want to get +1 strength on 3 squads, you're going to have to be like suppression fire on 1 squad and then take aim on another squad and then take cover on that 3rd one. But you don't want to do that. You want to use take aim, because take aim is the best stratagem. It's the best order. All right. So basically, the end result is that people aren't going to take Creed, because the go-to order for guard players is going to be take aim. And if they can't get +1 strength on them, then they're not going to do it. The way you might work around this is you might be like, well, I'll take 1st rank fire, 2nd rank fire, and I'll put that on a unit of Kazakin with brutal strength. and then I'll do take aim on another squad, and then I'll do like suppression fire on like another squad. You can kind of make it work, but it's so much less good. It's so much worse. It's just bleh. So the Creed mortar pit, dead. No point in taking Creed in the mortar pit now. Take a regular officer. The Krieg engineer death ball, where you took 3 units of engineers and you gave them all take aim and, you know, +1 strength from Lord Castellan's Fury, and suddenly your Krieg engineers went up to strength 5, AP -1, 30 shots a squad. That's not dead, but Creed is no longer needed for that. Honestly, the main reason people were taking Creed was the fact they could put +1 strength on 3 units. No one gives a shit about using an extra CP reroll. No one really cares about the fact you can do 3 orders. The reason you don't care she can do 3 orders is she doesn't have access to a Voxcaster. So realistically, you're going to do 1 order that's going to splash out to all of the people within 6 inches, and then the other 2 orders are kind of a waste of time. So her 3 orders don't really matter anymore. I can't tell them times I've had a regular Cade and Castellan and been like, I do my order and I don't need the second order. So the fact she has 3, big waste of time. +1 strength, a lot less easy to use, a lot less helpful, and the CP reroll thing really isn't a big deal. Why would I spend 80 points on a character that had 1 unique selling point that was worth a damn, and now it can't do it? Why would I do that? Instead, I'd rather head over to Forge World, spend 35 points on a Deathcore Marshal who can do 2 orders and has basically the exact same effect on the battlefield now. So honestly, I think that outside of some big 4D chest, 5D chest, wrinkly brain maneuver that someone's going to come up with, I think Creed is probably dead, and you're not going to see her taken in lists going forward. But it's always darkest before the dawn, guys. The Rogel Dawn tank, that is, of course. And the next part of the FAQ is actually quite a nice little buff, and it's certainly a shot in the arm for you mechanized players out there, because GW has clarified how the Chimera's mobile command vehicle ability works. Basically, guys, it gives you a free order. So if you've got an officer who's inside a Chimera, he can issue an order using the mobile command vehicle ability, and then he can disembark from the Chimera and do as many orders as he can normally do. So for example, well, the example that GW gives is, while embarked within a Chimera, Josh's Iron Hand Strachan issues 1 order using the mobile command vehicle ability, and then disembarks from the Chimera and issues Iron Hand Strachan's 2 normal orders using the disembarking officer rule, for a total of 3 orders issued. I have to be honest, I was really surprised by this update. I think most people had just assumed that the Chimera let you use 1 in your pool, and then if you got out, you had however many orders remaining left over, and that was it, like a Cade Castellan. He's doing 2 orders one way or another, either 1 inside and 1 outside. But no, apparently, the mobile command vehicle ability gives you an extra order for free. It's a bonus ability. I really like it. I really like it. It's another feather in the cap of the Chimera. Unfortunately, it is going to mean that Tauroxes are even less used now, because you can't get the bonus order from the mobile command vehicle ability from a Taurox. So I do think that it's a big boost to the Chimera. It's a slight shadow nerf to the Taurox though, but I'm Team Chimera all the way, guys. So there we go. Now, you might be thinking, how can I take advantage of this ability? Well, the simplest way you could look at it is you now don't need to spend as many points on officers. If you're getting bonus orders here and there from your Chimeras, you may not need to spend quite as many points on officers, which means you can then spend those points elsewhere on other support units, more infantry or some upgrades. So it's a great way of being a little bit more efficient with your points and squeezing every penny. But the big winners from this buff is going to be the Met Guard players, and it's going to have a pretty significant impact on the way they build and write their lists. You see, previously you would have a mechanized army, and it would typically be made up of 6 Chimeras with 6 infantry inside, a couple of officers, and then the rest of the points would go towards Lehman Russes and Lehman Russ tank commanders. But I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a lot more Sentinels in Met Guard armies, because they're a really cheap way of adding firepower to your Armored Fist squads. You can now take a little Armored Fist platoon, which is going to be 2 Chimeras with 2 infantry squads, all Acadian shop troops inside, and Acadian Castellan as well, taking advantage of that 12-man carrying capacity of the Chimera. And then you can support them with 3 Sentinels. This little group is really effective at moving up the board, taking an objective, and being able to lock it down, and being able to deal with those big threats. You see, previously, you had this mechanized platoon concept, but you didn't have the Sentinels in it. And the problem was that the Chimeras bring a bit of fire support to the squad, but typically heavy bolters are good, but when they come across something with a bit of heft behind it, they're going to start struggling. And if you want to be able to do damage to the opponent, you might have to jump out of your Chimera, start exposing your infantry with those plasma guns, those melter guns. You might do some damage to the enemy, but then the enemy's going to pick up your infantry and you might start losing that objective. It was a bit of a catch-22. You had all the elements there, but you either had to expose your infantry or you had to accept the fact you might not be doing the damage you want to do. Now you can bring a squadron of sentinels along and they're going to bring the fire support. Taking a unit of 3 sentinels with las cannons will cost you about 120 points, and they can still receive the take aim order from the Castellan whilst he's inside the Chimera. Suddenly, your little armor fist platoon has got not only the infantry, not only the durability, not only the volume of firepower coming from those chimeras, but it's also got 3 las cannons hitting on 3s to tear a chunk out of any big gribblies that you come across. If I was to expand this concept out using this FAQ and build a whole list around it, I'd probably take a mechanized list that consisted of 2 Death Corps marshals and a commissar with superior tactical training and the auto relic with Tiberius, so I could use him as a pseudo senior officer. I'd then take 6 squads of infantry and 6 chimeras, so I can form 3 of these little armored fist platoons. I would then support each one of those armored fist platoons with 3 scout sentinels with las cannons. That's 9 scout sentinels in total. That gives me a really nice effective core that I can use to put pressure on 3 points of the board. I can start taking that middle ground. I can start really taking the fight at the enemy with numbers, durability, and firepower. And then I'd back all of this up. I back it all up with a set of Lehman Russes. And you can still afford, I've looked at the points list, you can still afford a tank commander with Gatekeeper and like a whole lance cannon. And you can take 3 more Lehman Russes. Now, you can't put sponsors on any of these bad boys, but you can still take like 3 Lehman Russes with like execution of plasma cannons or battle cannons. And that is a lot of firepower. I really like this list because I feel like it's 3 or 4 mini armies inside one list. You've got these 3 armored fist platoons that can put pressure on 3 different parts of the board, and they can kind of look after themselves. They're kind of self-contained. But wherever your enemy decides to drop the hammer and concentrate their forces, you've got these 4 Lehman Russes that can back you up. And they're going to bring that extra bit of firepower that can get 1 or 2 of your armored fist platoons out of a sticky situation. So I think it's bringing everything to the table. It's got numbers, it's got durability, it's got shitloads of vehicles, and it's bringing firepower as well. But that is it, guys. That is the full FAQ. Now, I know some people are going to be surprised that there wasn't anything to do with like Kazakin or the Kazakin bomb in here. But to be honest, how I see this document is it is just a tweak by Games Workshop. They're just tightening up some of the confusion in the codex, some of the bits that weren't 100% clear. I suspect that a full nerf hammer, if we are going to get one, will be coming later in a separate update. But fingers crossed we don't, because I think Guard are in a really nice position right now. We're strong, but we're not unbeatable. And this was definitely the soft touch approach that I was happy to see GW take. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you think they went too far as FAQ? Do you think they didn't go far enough? Is there anything that you're still not certain about that you would like to see addressed in a future update from GW? Get it all down in that comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. And if you found today's video particularly helpful or informative, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. By becoming a channel member or patron, you will gain access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, which is an online community of over 1,000 active people. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of the latest channel members. So big thank you to Revan, Wise Old Worm, Yuki, Raiden, Rob Stark, Leo Dude 2000, Justin, X-Real, Nurgle's Grin, Joe Camel, Jordan, Manuel, Cozy Strats, Magellix, Chris Brett, Fool's Fate, The Malevolent Spoon, Unknown Dice, Stuart Robertson, Farah, Scott H, Jurien, and Last Night's Leftovers. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you for becoming channel members. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a massive thank you to Jens, JC, John, Real Steel, Kobold, Craig, and Duo Tan. Thank you guys for your Patreon support. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a massive thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and August Varney. Thank you guys. Your ongoing and generous Patreon support really does make a huge, huge difference. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.